Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciated the speech made by my colleague from just south of my constituency, and certainly this is an incredibly complex and important series of issues. It's not just related to this particular bill, but a whole host of larger security and cybersecurity issues. But I'm wondering if he could provide further comments specifically on just the lack of leadership that Canada has shown on the world stage over the last 8 years that this particular Prime Minister has been in charge. If he could comment on that lack of leadership and if it has impacted Canada's reputation globally.
Honourable member for Medicine Hat, Carson Warner, about 45 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to my colleague to the north of my riding for that question. It is disconcerting as Canadians when we look at the history over this party since the Liberals, since they've been in for 7 years and 4.5 or 5 months, going on 8 years. So it's 8 years with inflation. That's right. Inflation brings it to 8 years. One of the things that I think is really important is we have lost face, if you will, to use that term, with our global partners, our Five Eyes agencies, who have now gone and done things without us because we have not been at the table. We've been slow to react to the very legitimate concerns about cybersecurity and national security of this country and as our allies. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And, a common theme that I've heard highlighted well, I think, from members certainly from the Conservative side is how past records are one of the best indicators for future success or failure. And certainly when it comes to the issues surrounding Huawei and cybersecurity, we see Canada, especially its reputation on the world stage, being greatly diminished by the actions and, in many cases, inaction of this Liberal government and in particular, this Liberal Prime Minister over the course of 5 years. Madam Speaker, my question to my colleague from Bruce Grey Owen Sound is simply this. Could he expand on how those past actions have diminished Canada's reputation amongst allies and partners?
Very brief answer from the Honourable Member for Bruce Grey Owen Sound.
Look, Madam Speaker, I referenced a couple important books, a couple references by some of our esteemed national security experts across this country. If you read through that and read some books that are out there, this has been a threat that's been building for the better part of a decade or more, and this government's known about this since the day that they formed government, and yet we've seen no action. And as I quoted here from the CSIS director from 2018, here we are 5 years almost later, and we're now just seeing this important legislation being delivered.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the speech that my colleague made. The track record, I think, here is one of the biggest points that I took from his speech, and specifically he referenced how the government delayed for years and years and years related to their decision on Huawei. This is not a new concern, but Madam Speaker, after 8 years of the Liberals delaying, refusing to take action and to provide leadership, while many of our global counterparts have, and specifically he emphasized very well, I think, the example of Huawei. I'm wondering if he could expand a little further on how damaging that delay was to Canada's international reputation on cybersecurity.
Member for Central Okanagan, Similkin and Nicola.
Well, Madam Speaker, and governments are made up of people, and people make mistakes. And Madam Speaker, after probably talking to many of our allies and seeing what the United States, Great Britain, and New Zealand and other Five Eyes partners have done, Australia, they've probably heard back the feedback that it was a black eye. It took so long for Huawei to be banned from Canada's 5G infrastructure. And so now, Madam Speaker, perhaps this is the overreaction to try to make up for that space. But let me tell you, Madam Speaker, in this place, in this country, we want laws that are just and fair and most of all practicable. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, this is a one-size-fits-all, big, bossy government that says, trust us, we know the shots, and we will take them as we see them. They have not done well in the past, Madam Speaker, and this overshoot, I believe, is to respond to that lack of credibility from Huawei. But two wrongs do not make a right, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for his very, very insightful speech. Now, he talked a little bit about how there's some concern related to the oversight that would be associated with the wide sweeping powers that the government may be granting to itself in this bill. I'm wondering if he could expand a little bit more about why it's important that through the processes both of debate in this place and through committee work that we ensure that we have the appropriate balances in place to ensure we get that oversight side of things right.
Honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague, Battle River Crow, for his excellent question. Parliament exists to defend the rights and the liberties of the Canadian people. And so whenever government comes forward with a piece of legislation, and oftentimes I find this legislation is highly technical because the technical legislation is often where you see the biggest changes that will impact people's lives. And so when we're proposing, the government is proposing giving sweeping powers to the minister to have control over sectors that impact every facet of Canadian lives, we need to do our due diligence as parliamentarians and bring forward the stakeholders, bring forward the witnesses, bring forward the civil liberties advocates to ensure that the rights and liberties of Canadians are protected. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.